There you go. 4-punch, 5-punch, 6-punch combination. Body shot, bang, 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 bang.
Telling him not to counterpunch.
Boom! Will Rackman get up? Reloading!
Iron. You're going through all the instructions. This is for the championship of the world. I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?
Welcome back to another episode of the Fight City Podcast. This is your host, Alden Chodash, joining you with Jeff Fuss. We're going to be here discussing what happened last night with Terence Crawford's victory over Shawn Porter and also Canelo Alvarez's recent move up to cruiserweight to fight Junior Makubu to make history as a 5-division world champion. Well, first things first, how are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm wonderful, especially after such an exciting night of boxing. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well myself. Last night was a lot of drama on many fronts, but I mean, let's focus on the fight first. We had Terence Crawford. This was, by all accounts, his career-defining victory. Stoppage in the 10th round over Shawn Porter. He becomes the first out of an illustrious slew of fighters that have faced Porter to ever stop him, one-upping Earl Spence. What did you make of the fight overall?
I really enjoyed it. I really thought Porter, Porter typically has a tendency, whenever I've seen sparring footage of him, I'm like, all right, this guy can box. Like we know Porter can box, but then when he gets under the bright lights, it kind of sometimes seems he throws that out the window.
Mm-hmm.
But last night I was like, all right, Porter is on point. He's landing that overhand right, really herky-jerky style with his footwork. So I was really impressed with Porter's performance, and I was kind of questioning Terence Crawford there for a bit. But of course, right, Terence Crawford isn't the fastest right out the gate starter. He was downloading all of that information from Porter, but came out obviously with an impressive victory. The only person to ever stop Shawn Porter.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll discuss later, but maybe the only person in Porter's career, as Porter just recently announced his retirement. I thought that the fight had a very bull versus matador type dynamic in there. And early on, it seemed like Crawford was just downloading a lot of information. He gave up several of the early rounds while he was getting a read on Porter's controlled aggression. But eventually he started to control Porter by the middle to late rounds and got him out of there in the 10th round. The stoppage was caught me off guard, at least. And then Kenny Porter's reaction to throwing in the towel in the post-fight interview was basically that he knew, based on Shawn Porter's preparation and the hunger not being there in training camp, that he had his mind made up. Some might question whether or not he had really a lot of faith going into the fight that Porter was going to prevail anyways. A lot of drama in the post-fight on Kenny Porter's front. A lot of criticism has been launched his way. What did you make of his decision?
At first, once I saw them jumping up on the ropes, I was really confused. I was like, what is going on? Is there something that I did not see? But clearly it was Kenny Porter calling an end to the fight.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of questioned it. Shawn Porter is he's a showman. Him punching the canvas, I just assumed was out of frustration. It's like, crap, I can't believe I got caught again.
Yeah.
But when I rewatched it earlier this morning, and I noticed that when he took that initial step to kind of get back up, I saw a little bit of like an imbalance. So I'm assuming Kenny Porter saw that, right? Because he's right there at ringside. I'm sitting at home on my couch. Probably saw that and was like, you know what? And like you said, based off his knowledge of the preparation, was like, all right, this is the bad territory that we are not prepared to fight. And I'd rather, Thanksgiving's right around like next week. I'd rather not see my son not be at that dinner table. So that's where I think my initial reaction was like, yo, this is too premature. But of course, in hindsight, it probably was a good call.
Yeah, it was very different than what you often see with father-son dynamics. I mean, you think Trinidad versus Hopkins, where Felix Sr. Saw Trinidad taking probably even worse beating against Hopkins and still was telling his son he was winning and kept sending him out round after round. You saw Shane Mosley and his father in the first Vernon Forrest fight, something slightly similar. This was different. This was definitely not the narrative that we're used to seeing in the father-son dynamic, in which the father doesn't want to upset his son almost and step in on his behalf.
Yeah, I guess like I was saying earlier, I was really questioning because I was thinking, you know what, Shawn, he can recover. He seemed kind of okay, right? At the initial instinct when I was watching it. So I was thinking, all right, maybe Dad will let him finish this round. But then when they called it, and then what his statement was later in the ring post fight, that's when I started really scratching my head. Maybe Kenny just didn't find the correct words that he was looking for in the moment. But I did feel maybe with that initial interview that he was kind of throwing Shawn under the bus a little bit, because I thought Shawn was performing really well up until that point, right?
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I don't know if all the criticism is deserved, because Shawn was in this fight. Like, it wasn't like he was down on the scorecards.
Yeah, I mean, he was only down a point going into the 10th round on 2 of the judges' scorecards, down 3 points on the 3rd. Obviously, the 10-7 round, at the very least, was going to make it very difficult for him to pull out a decision. But, yeah. I mean, he's gotten off the canvas before to close fight strong, like against Errol Spence. So, yeah, he was going to go down on his shield, but for one reason or another, Kenny Porter didn't think that was worth the risk in there. It just, my first reaction was, it was almost a vindictive response to his dissatisfaction of his son in training camp, not heeding his instruction, not showing that kind of hunger, and just kind of stepping in on his behalf and saying, if you're not going to do what I say, then I'm not going to let this go on.
Fair, and I think that, that is very plausible. Like you said, I did like the one thing Max Kellerman said last night in the post-fight discussion was that Kenny likes to be in control. Yeah. And of course, it ties, I think, back to when he lost his brother at such a young age. Yeah. But when things are getting out of his control, that's when he's like becoming a little bit more, how can I gain re-control of the situation? And by stopping the fight, right? That would have been the ultimate way to do so. So, yeah, I think your idea there is very plausible.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we had Terence Crawford fighting his final fight on the long Top Rank contract that he was under. He has left Top Rank now to presumably become a free agent, but of course, Arum still expressed that he wanted to help him make the Spence fight and the Josh Taylor fight. Crawford threw cold water on that right away in the post-fight press conference. I don't know if you saw it, but he said right in front of him, Bob couldn't secure me the Spence fight when I was with him, so how is he going to secure me the Spence fight when I'm not with him? He's moving on. I'm moving on with my career right now, and I wish everyone the best. I thought Arum just looked more regretful than anything when Crawford launched that bomb in front of him.
One of the biggest promoters just sitting there kind of, like you said, that look of regret on his face. And I don't blame Crawford for making that statement public in front of Arum. Like, dude, you've had all this time to make this deal and you couldn't do it. I'm bouncing.
Yeah.
Now he's going to go become a free agent. So, I mean, that leaves, I'm very curious what opportunities for Crawford now that he's a free agent are out there. Like, is he going to take like a Canelo type of route? Is he going to, maybe is he going to possibly cross over, maybe go over to PBC if they have an enticing deal?
That would be, I think, in his best interest right now, because the rest of the welterweight talent is at PBC. He's got Errol Spence to look forward to. He's got Yordenis Ugas. He's got plenty of big fights that he could make on the other side of the road. He even mentioned 154 pounds yesterday. But it seemed like the time to make the Spence fight would presumably be now. It seems like the biggest obstacle in the way is no longer a constraint on making this fight. I say do it now.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
I think it's the best time to do it now. I mean, both guys are very inactive. They've been fighting on average once a year for the last several years. We had Spence with the accident a year and a half ago, and we had Crawford. He's 35 years old, so the clock is ticking. And I think it's time to cash in.
I will say I was kind of disappointed. Now, they can do whatever they want. They're grown men, right? Like you said, 35, 34. I was disappointed with Spence getting up at the announce, seeing that Kenny Porter had halted the fight, that Spence had dipped out of the arena, because that would have been the moment, that you could have showcased, like you could have drawn a lot of eyes and a lot of attention by just stepping into that ring and saying, yo, I'm here, because, Crawford's been calling him out like apparently all day yesterday. So it is disappointing that he decided to leave. And there's so much money on the table. I'm kind of curious, like, what is with the hesitation of this money fight? I like, why does Spence not want it? And I'm just throwing this out there because he didn't step in the ring. I don't know. I'm confused, but I'm with you. They need to make this fight.
I agree, 100%. It's interesting that right after his diss to Aram, Crawford gave a big shout out to Shakur Stevenson in the post-fight press conference. I think that's pretty interesting for Stevenson because Shakur's already expressed dismay at Bob Arum's reluctance to make the Oscar Valdez fight right away, instead trying to make Valdez versus Navarrete. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of influence Crawford, who's already something of a mentor figure to Stevenson, will have on Shakur's future plans with Top Rank.
Yeah, I mean, he has that big brother attachment to Shakur. So is it very possible, you know, because as we all know, like whenever the camera was on Shakur, the crowd just erupted into applause and cheering for this young man. So this guy is already like, and we know he's a headliner. So is it very possible that he's like, hey, Bob, I don't need you?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much fights he has left on the Top Rank contract, but when I saw his post-fight press conference against Herring last month, you know, he was very vocal in saying that it would be very lame for Bob Arum to not make the Valdez fight right away. And in the past, he's critiqued Top Rank in public for giving him easy fights, for giving him cupcakes. I mean, this guy that really wants to challenge himself in the peak of his career right now. And if he's not feeling like he's getting that, then it's really only a matter of time before he jumps ship to some other means that will provide him those opportunities. But Canelo Alvarez, on the other hand, doesn't have to worry about that because he's already a free agent. He's already at the top of the sport. Arguably, he might still be the top pound for pound, although there's some dissenting opinions, especially on ESPN, of whether or not Crawford took over that top spot with his victory yesterday. But earlier this week, Canelo announced that he's going to be moving up to cruiserweight, WBC variant of cruiserweight, and I'll explain that distinction in a minute, to fight Junior Makabu for his title, the WBC champion. And that's very important. That's very important subtlety because unlike the rest of the sanctioning bodies, WBC is the only sanctioning body with the Bridgerweight division under it. So that maxes out at 225 pounds. And Mauricio Suleiman announced last year his intention to lower the weight limit for cruiserweight to 190 pounds to kind of accommodate the Bridgerweight division, make it a little more, make it a little broader. So really, Canelo is not making as big of a jump as he would be originally to fight Makabu, who normally weighs in upwards of 195 and near 200 pounds for his fights. So one way of looking at it is that this is another example of window shopping done by Canelo throughout the annals of history to become a 5-division world champion without, you know, taking on as big of a risk as it would appear.
I was really confused once I saw that this was being announced on even major news networks, like their sports coverage. I was like, what is Canelo talking about? He's jumping all the way up to cruiserweight. It makes me really question what is why, you know, why specifically the cruiserweight, especially Lungu Makabu? Is this potentially, like, who is whispering to Canelo? Is this a potential money grab? Is this to I know they keep framing it as he wants to challenge himself, especially with Reynoso saying we can see what Canelo does to heavyweights that he's sparring. Yeah. So this makes the perfect sense to jump up to cruiserweight. Well, if you're watching him work with heavyweights, I'm surprised that he hasn't even just made the full jump up to a potential heavyweight, find a smaller heavyweight to fight, just to showcase his skill set. I don't know if it's also possible just because it's a WBC title, you know, a sanctioning fee. They're going to get a little payday here. And then I also realized that Makabu is promoted by Don King. So is it possible that they're going to go back to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly known as Zaire? And are we going to start seeing another headline of Rumble in the Jungle 2?
I think that's very possible. I think, well, Canelo's name on the ticket already makes events massive because he is the cash cow of boxing. This would be a very creative promotion, I think, if they had this fight in the Congo, and you know, you had Canelo's cohort there, and I guess Makabu's cohort of fans there as well. You probably have to make an arena to make this happen. Yeah, that would be a very interesting promotion, and it's exciting to look at. Just to look forward to how big this promotion would be, but at the same time, there are bigger fights for him to take, and fights that don't have that mark of 5 division world champion historical value on top of it, but nonetheless are fights that I think would be much more competitive and much more challenging for Canelo. I think boogeymen like David Benavidez or Artur Beterbiev at 175 would be the perfect 2 fights for Canelo to take to really show that he is the best Mexican fighter of all time if he were to get by those guys decisively. Makabu, if you look back in history, 20 years from now, and you see Canelo moved up to take that risk, it's kind of like watching Chris Eubank move up to cruiserweight to take on Carl Thompson. It's forgettable.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm like really confused is this specific opponent and within this division, because it's not like the cruiserweights, right, get a lot of love. You have Usyk who unified the entire division, Evander Holyfield before him. But besides that, you go ask the average fight fan, hey, who's your favorite cruiserweight? They're gonna be like, well, what's a cruiserweight?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a 5. Well, Canelo's. Well, first of all, first things first. I keep hearing history being thrown around. Canelo is not going to be the first 5-division world champion. That was done with Thomas Hearns and then Ray Leonard shortly after, and De La Hoya won titles in 6 different weight divisions. Floyd Mayweather won titles in 5 different weight divisions. Manny Pacquiao in 7. So Canelo is not making history here. He might be chasing it, but if he wants to tie De La Hoya's feet by moving up to heavyweight or bridgerweight, probably more realistically bridgerweight, that really doesn't carry as much value to me as it would if he were to move up to 175 again and decisively stop at Artur Beterbiev, who's knocked out everybody who's ever stepped in the ring against him, or do the same to David Benavidez, despite it being at 168 pounds. That's kind of where I'm getting at, this being more window shopping than anything. Canelo has convinced himself that, this is something worth getting out of bed for and chasing history for. But for the real true hardcore fans, I don't really see this as, being exactly what he thinks it is.
Now, this is only speculation on my end, but I know I heavily agree with you. Part of me is thinking that, is he bumping up to cruiserweight, right? To kind of set this narrative, like let's say he takes care of Makabu and like dynamic and just destroys this guy, right? Let's just say he does that.
Which has been done before. Tony Bellew did it in 2 or 3 rounds. So
yeah, exactly. Well, with this weight difference, right? Canelo Alvarez he could walk around at 180. Is it going to be when he decides to come back possibly to light heavyweight and then the Beterbiev fight is made? Oh, well, look how well he handled this cruiserweight. Like, he's going to make easy work of BTPF. Like, that's a completely different weight division. Is that the way this is being shifted, like to construct some type of narrative to set up the next fight to that 175-pound division? Because I just thought it was, like you said, why is he not fighting BTPF or David Benavidez now? Why is he jumping up?
It's very interesting you say that, because it parallels the Triple G1 narrative, pre-fight narrative very well, in the sense that Canelo for the longest time was not willing to go all in against Triple G at 160 until he made that step up above 160. I think it was 165 to fight Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., a lesser fighter, but at least Canelo got his feet wet in that heavier weight division before feeling strong enough to handle the strongest fighter at the time at 160 pounds in Triple G. So this might be his means of proving to himself that he is strong enough to compete with a big cruiserweight like Makabu, although a cruiserweight that's going to have to cut weight down to the 190-pound limit of the WBC, just to show to himself that he might be ready to take on Beterbiev right now.
Yeah, because I mean, you get Beterbiev in there with Makabu. I mean, God knows what's going to happen to Makabu. But that's like you said, I even forgot that the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight was fought at 165.
Yeah.
So maybe this is his litmus test. So it's because we all know Canelo Alvarez, he's calculated, right? He's the top dog now. He's the money fight. He's stated that many times. So yeah, I guess maybe he's just getting his feet wet, see if he can handle the power, the bump up in weight. And I am kind of curious though, long term, how did the weight jumps like this affect Canelo Alvarez? Because, well, he is only 31, right? He's not towards the end of his career yet. He's still a fairly young guy, but not fresh and spry. But yeah, gosh, I just don't know. This just seems so odd. But like you said earlier, it does make for an interesting promotion. Like, what creativity will they have with this, especially if they hold it in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Makabu's backyard?
I like that, the second Rumble in the Jungle, the second coming of that. If there's anything left of the arena in Zaire that hosted Ali Foreman in 40 or 50 years ago, I hope they can make use of it. Really do.
Yeah.
But you also bring up an interesting point of jumping up and down weight divisions, which a lot of people will think of the example that Roy Jones left when he moved up to fight John Ruiz at heavyweight and then moved back down to 175, in which it was already the beginning of the end. What impact will it have on Canelo, who will probably fight at probably around 185 pounds for this fight against Makabu, moving back down to either 168 or 175? And more importantly, what does this do for the likes of Jermall Charlo and David Benavidez and Triple G, who are clamoring to fight him at 168? But, if he moves up to 190 for this fight, do they really see this as still being a viable fight for them at 168 pounds, or do they kind of move on with their own round robin of fights?
I mean, if he's able to cut back down the weight and let's say there's no real adverse effects, kind of like what I guess we saw with Roy Jones bumping up to heavyweight and then back down, if I were them, how much do they have in the tank to possibly punish or hurt Canelo Alvarez if he's taking heavier punches like this and he's already sparring heavyweight. So, I am kind of curious to see how do they feel that they match up against him at 168, because he's already gone on to a heavier division. And now he's coming back down. So I'm kind of curious, like, what is their mentality regarding Canelo? Do they, like you said, just do a round robin within their own respective weight division if Canelo does choose to not come back? But, maybe the payday's already lost on him. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of other fights, at least for the 160 pounders, to make. Demetrius Andrade had the second round knockout against Jason Quigley. I think him and Jermall Charlo would be a very good fight. Either of them against Jaime Munguia be a very good fight, or even Triple G versus Murata, the winner, would be as well. David Benavidez is in a little bit of an awkward spot because his best fights for him right now are either Canelo, who might be moving up, or Jermall Charlo, who might, if he chooses to, be in a 160-pound tussle for the undisputed championship. But this certainly does throw a wrench into a lot of people's expectations. I think a lot of people were thinking it was either going to be Benavidez or Charlo next. I think this move almost lends more credence to Beterbiev being a possible future fight for Canelo. But yeah, I mean, Canelo moves the needle in exactly the way he wants to do it, and it's exactly in a way that nobody ever really predicts.
Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?